Good day, Nexus Enterprises Senior Management. Today, we will be addressing the paradox of workplace flexibility at Nexus Enterprises. We will briefly introduce the dilemma and analyze the problems perceived at organizational and individual levels. Initial recommendations of policies and practices will be made, plus factors beyond policies and practices, and the proposed implementation plan followed by the conclusion. Nexus Enterprises has always been a leader in workplace flexibility, with the industry's most progressive hybrid work models. While this core business model has attracted top talent requiring greater autonomy, there has been no return to office after COVID-19. Nexus recognizes that the current model is unsustainable as organizational cohesion is weakening with a push against the excesses of remote work. This presentation seeks to critically analyze and present the underlying problems from the organizational and individual perspective, with recommendations towards both flexibility and in-person engagements with actionable steps for Nexus. There is a perception of the erosion of organizational identity, collaboration, and values within the organization. Nexus Industry prides itself on a continued emphasis on collaborative innovation, work-life balance, trust-based management, and results-oriented performance. However, post-COVID-19, the offices have remained empty due to convenience, family responsibilities, or simple inertia from employees. What happened? A distinct loss of organizational identity is found where individuals do not feel their relatedness and belongingness is fulfilled by the organization. COVID-19 exposed this after government-mandated work from home ended and there is a return to the hybrid work model. The offices remained empty. There has also been no formal managerial policies and practices as a bridge for developing organizational identity. Without any warm bodies in the office, Nexus Industry loses out on social learning through informal knowledge sharing occurring among employees to achieve collaborative innovation, which could affect results-oriented performance. Additionally, Nexus Industries are particularly disadvantaged regarding early career employees. Without senior staff present to serve as seasoned experts, novices cannot reproduce the professional sequences or routines necessary for their development. If there's no senior to learn from in a social context, there will be no skills passed on through informal knowledge sharing. When Nexus Industries first established itself, it attracted talent with progressive hybrid work models, allowing employees to work remotely as much as they desired. However, with the trend that employees should be present in the office gaining traction as a necessary recalibration after the excesses of remote work, this may be framed as an abandonment of Nexus Industries' espoused values if the return to office mandate is issued. Its current attempts on mandatory in-person team meetings and virtual meeting restrictions were viewed as frustrating and disruptive. In-office presence for networking and career progression seemed forced. This is already perceived as an erosion of behavioral integrity, a betrayal to staff, and value incongruence with a disconnect between organizational values and employee values.
To understand Nexus dilemma, we can use stakeholder theory as a guide, because this is not just a simple question about whether employees should come back to office or not. The issue is that different stakeholder groups are affected differently by workplace flexibility. Stakeholder theory argues that organizations should consider the interests of different groups rather than prioritizing only one side. In Nexus' case, flexibility supports autonomous and work-life balance for many employees. However, it can also weaken collaboration, coordination, and organization connection if left unmanaged. Therefore, the challenge for Nexus is not just attendant, it is more about how to balance competing stakeholder needs. Different groups of employees are affected in different ways. Early career employees and new hire often need more in-person interaction because mentoring, informal learning, and socialization are important for smooth adaptation into the organization. On the other hand, senior or long-serving employee may already have strong network and experience, so they may adapt more easily to flexible work. Managers themselves have different concerns as they are responsible for team coordination, coaching, and maintaining cohesion. At the same time, caregivers and employees with disability may rely on flexibility as an issue of fairness and inclusion, not just convenience. This means Nexus cannot assume that the same work arrangement is equally fair or effective for everyone. Now that we have identified these distinct groups and their competing needs, we need to ask, what if Nexus gets this wrong? What if we force a one-size-fits-all policy? What might happen? We could be facing these three major risks. Firstly will be talent attribute. If Nexus leans too hard into forcing a return to office, we could immediately lose out on valuable employees such as caregiver and diverse talent who rely on flexibility to our direct competitors. Next will be cultural erosion. An unmanaged yet total flexibility dissolves our organizational glue. In fact, a major 2022 study by Young and colleagues on the effect of remote work found that without a structured coordination, employee network become highly static and siloed. If we don't manage this, our early career hire will miss out on mentoring and our cross-team innovation will suffer. Following that will be managerial burnout. Without a clear framework, middle managers are left carrying the heavy burdens of coordinating this fragmented silo team. Ultimately, prioritizing one group at the expense of another damages the whole organization. As R. Edward Freeman, the pioneer of stakeholder theory, argues that we must avoid the trade-off fallacy. Successful organizations must find ways to align and create value for all core stakeholders.
As Paul and Keith explained, Nexus has both structural and individual difficulties. It is not simply about returning employees to the office. A more complex issue is about the well-being of employees as balanced against the performance of the organization. Given this context, we do not advocate for either the full return to office or the complete work from home. A suitable option is a purpose-based hybrid work model. This is congruent with the stakeholder theory proposition, which is about the organization aiming to satisfy the needs of the organization groups of stakeholders rather than favoring one at the expense of others. A full return to office strategy produces additional complexity. From the perspective of organizational culture, it damages Nexus employer branding and go against the established culture of organizational flexibility. For the employees, it has the potential to compromise the psychological contract given that flexibility is now an implicit norm. However, attaining total flexibility is equally unsustainable. As mentioned earlier, the collaboration and knowledge sharing aspect are starting to dissipate, and so is the organizational identity. According to identity theory, a sense of belonging is developed by employee through some form of contact, and social learning theory states that learning and mentoring occurs in the presence of others. This advantage of interaction begin to diminish over time in the absence of regular contact. We therefore suggest attendance at the office for specific purposes. Office attendance is for collaboration, mentoring, and innovation. The individual work and tasks can be done from home. This sustains the self-determination theory, since employees have the choice and freedom to organize their individual work while still achieving the organization goal. Successful hybrid work model requiring accommodating diverse employee groups. The needs of a caregiver, newly hired staff, senior staff, and staff with disability varies. This incorporates intersectionally as it understands that employees may hold different identity and situations. One policy simply does not fit all. Hybrid model also depends on effective leadership. In the context of hybrid model, leadership means actively participating in collaboration days, leading by examples, and overall encouraging the model. Employee emulates the behavior of their leaders.
Thanks Ming Hui for sharing the initial recommendation. Below I would like to share more consideration in implementing the change. Your previous effort looked reasonable but have failed. We suggest that problems rest in the implementation. Vision alignment, actions that are not addressing the real problems and not consistent with each other, unprepared for employee resistance, and poor communication are all possible causes. Hence, we would suggest a 10-step framework from literature and outline an implementation plan with important pointers to help address the problem. Step 1 is to address the problem. Nexus has taken a good first step in inviting us to perform this analysis. Further feedback can be collected from employees to validate our findings. Step 2 is to form a coalition that consists of both management members taking charge of the change and representatives from each team who can bring up views and concerns from teams and individuals. People who can be trusted, have good cognitive capability, and suitable traits such as good stress management are good members of the coalition. Step 3 is to come up with a vision for Nexus. This is an expression of the final goal that aligns everyone's expectation and provides a basis of defining if the change is successful. But the vision cannot be too specific that actions become ends to itself. For Nexus, it may mean considering work-life balance, trusted-based management, and results-oriented performance are still the cornerstone of Nexus identity. The defined vision will then be communicated to all people. Explain clearly why changes are needed. There should be additional messages embedded in the communication to address the interests and concerns of employees. This is followed by collecting initial feedback from employees through different channels. Drawing up an employee value proposition that clearly defines the relationship between vision, value, benefits, and experience of working for Nexus would be helpful. Step 5 is mobilizing energy for change. This means planning the implementation across multiple levels. This may also involve more information gathering for adjusting the policy details and actual implementation flow. A readiness assessment on political support and competence of change management team is critical in dealing with potential resistance. Step 6 emphasizes empowerment for employees to come up with new ideas and implementation details, and they are a critical part of the solution since our problem is an adaptive challenge. This is also useful in giving employees a sense of ownership and hence reducing the resistance and making solutions practical. Step 7 involves learning new skills and knowledge. This is about their understanding of the vision and the expected behaviors to consistently realize the defined vision. Motivation in adjusting their behavior is the key. Carefully design rewards and punishments to reinforce correct behaviors and discourage undesired ones are vital. Step 8 is to identify short-term wins and communicate them to reinforce the change. Naturally, metrics need to be determined, monitored, and shared with employees to demonstrate the outcomes. This can be quantitative indicators that reflect financial performance, turnover rate, and innovation improvement, and qualitative indicators that measure perceived knowledge improvement from social learning, personal equity, and organizational identity enhancement. Step 9 is about sustaining the change process. Time, resources, and efforts needed to be persistent. For example, there is time cost for leaders consistently working in the office. Efforts are needed for delicately managed work arrangement and planning to accommodate both organizational and employee needs. More manpower may be required for added leave days and flexible arrangement for special groups. If sustained improvements are indicated by the KPIs are observed, incorporate the changes as long-term business practices. Further communication and information gathering with employees can sustain and evolve policies and actions according to changing organizational development, market, and employee needs. To conclude, adopting this framework makes priority clear, defines what and when communications are to be made, outlines leadership and employee responsibilities, addresses ways to find out and deal with potential resistance in different stages, and considers how to measure success and cater for possible adjustment needed through review. In this presentation, we analyzed the underlying problems on both organizational and individual levels using behavioral models from literature. provided initial recommendations in policies and actions, and outlined a 10-step implementation with important aspects to consider during the process. We want to reiterate that the issue of not returning to the office is only a symptom of underlying problems. Hence, we need to resolve the underlying conflicts rather than just forcefully cure the symptoms. Implementing changes that truly involve employees to improve performance while keeping a caring touch with employees to retain company's core identity is always the highest principle to keep Nexus alive and enable it to flourish. That's the end of our presentation. Thanks for listening.